I never thought my life would smell like lemon-scented bleach and other people's money. But there I was, 6:30 on a Thursday morning, on my knees in a penthouse that cost more than I'd earn in 10 lifetimes, scrubbing grout lines in a bathroom larger than my entire apartment. The marble was cold. Italian Carrara, if the owner had mentioned it correctly during my first visit. Mrs. Chen liked to talk about her things, the origin of every piece, the cost, carefully wrapped in phrases like investment pieces and curated collection. I didn't mind. It was easier to let her talk than to fill the silence with my own thoughts. My hands ached, the kind of ache that starts in the knuckles and spreads through the tendons, settling into the bones. I'd been working for Elite Home Services for 9 months, long enough that my hands had developed permanent cracks along the edges of my fingernails, small fissures that never quite healed before I split them open again. I'd tried lotion, an expensive kind, the kind I'd buy Lily for Christmas if I had the money. But lotion doesn't hold up against commercial-grade cleaning solution and 6 hours of scrubbing. I sat back on my heels, pushing my glasses up my nose with the back of my wrist. The frames were loose, had been for 3 months, $28 to tighten them at the optometrist, or groceries for the week. The choice wasn't really a choice. The apartment stretched out behind me, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the kind of view people paid millions for. The morning light cut through the glass in sharp angles, illuminating dust particles I'd need to eliminate before Mrs. Chen returned from her Pilates class at 9. I had 2.5 hours. Bathroom, kitchen, living room, master bedroom. The second bedroom she used as a closet didn't need attention today. Small mercies. I stood, my knees cracking in protest. 29 years old, and my body moved like I was 50. That's what happened when you spent 40 hours a week on your hands and knees. That's what happened when you fell from grace so quickly you didn't have time to brace for impact. 14 months since Philip served the papers. 11 months since I lost my job at Ashford Preparatory Academy. 9 months since I started cleaning houses that belonged to people who wouldn't have noticed me when I was Professor Ashford, who certainly didn't notice me now that I was just Claire, the woman who made their homes spotless. I used to teach literature, Jane Austen, the Brontes, Toni Morrison. I used to stand in front of classrooms full of bored teenagers and try to make them care about words, about stories, about the way language could crack you open and rebuild you into something new. I'd loved it. The lesson planning, the discussions, even the grading. I'd loved watching a student's face change when they finally understood why beloved mattered, why Pride and Prejudice wasn't just a romance, why words were worth paying attention to. Then Philip's affair came out. Not quietly, not discreetly. A student, his student, 22 years old with long legs and an internship at a publishing house he'd secured for her. The kind of affair that made headlines in academic circles. Married professor, father of one, caught with graduate student. The story had everything: power imbalance, betrayal, a wife who'd been stupid enough not to see it coming. He'd filed for divorce 3 weeks later. I thought I'd be fine. I had my job, my daughter, my own income. I didn't need him. But Philip had friends, department chairs, board members, parents who donated generously to Ashford Prep. And Philip was very good at rewriting narratives. By the time the divorce was finalized, I wasn't the betrayed wife anymore. I was the unstable one, the jealous one, the one who'd made scenes, sent inappropriate emails, couldn't separate personal issues from professional responsibilities. None of it was true. All of it stuck. I lost my position 2 months after the divorce. Budget cuts, they said. Restructuring. My specific role was no longer necessary. They were very sorry. They'd provide a reference for future employment, though when I'd called that reference, the administration office had been curiously vague about my performance. So here I was, Carrara marble and lemon bleach and hands that would never look like a professor's hands again. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I stripped off my gloves, yellow rubber, size medium, bought in bulk from a warehouse store, and checked the screen. Rosie, you eat breakfast? I typed back with still damp fingers. Yes, it was a lie. I'd had coffee. Black because I was out of milk and wouldn't get paid until Friday. But Rosie worried, and I didn't need her worry on top of my own. Rosie Martinez was my supervisor at Elite Home Services, though supervisor was a generous term for someone who got an extra $1 per hour to coordinate schedules and handle client complaints. She was 42, built like someone who'd raised 3 kids and buried 1 husband. With short hair, she dyed an aggressive shade of red every 6 weeks. She'd taken one look at me on my first day, gaunt, exhausted, trying not to cry in the supply closet. tea and decided I was her project. I appreciated it, most days. My phone buzzed again. Rosie, liar. Lunch later, my treat. I didn't argue. Rosie didn't take no for an answer, and honestly, I was tired of saying no. Tired of pretending I had it together when we both knew I was held together with duct tape and spite. I finished the bathroom by 8. Kitchen by 9:15. I was wiping down the living room baseboards when Mrs. Chen returned, yoga mat under one arm, green smoothie in hand. "Oh, Claire, wonderful," she said, not quite looking at me. She never looked directly at me. I was part of the house, functional, necessary, invisible. "All be done in 20 minutes, I said. "Perfect. I have a call at 10. She drifted toward her bedroom, already pulling out her phone. I finished at 9:40. Packed my supplies into the canvas bag Elite Home Services provided, checked that I hadn't missed any spots, and let myself out through the service entrance. Always the service entrance. I'd learned that the first week. The subway ride from the Upper East Side to Queens took 40 minutes. I spent it staring at my reflection in the dark window across from me, superimposed over advertisements for lawyers and dermatologists, and a new musical I'd never see. I looked tired. Older than 29. My hair, dark brown and pulled into a knot at the base of my neck, had started showing gray at the temples. I couldn't afford to dye it. Lily didn't care, so neither did I. Lily, I checked my phone. 10:30. I had until 5 to pick her up from Little Explorers daycare. 6 hours. I had another client at noon, a studio apartment in Chelsea, quick job, just maintenance cleaning, and then I was done for the day. Thursdays were light. Fridays I worked until 7. I got off at the Jackson Heights stop and walked 4 blocks to the daycare. It was housed in the basement of a church, linoleum floors and fluorescent lights and toys that had been donated by families whose children had outgrown them. It cost $800 a month, which was half what the nice daycare near Ashford Prep cost and twice what I could afford. But Lily was safe there. The teachers were kind. She had friends. That was worth everything. I signed her out at 5:15. She ran to me the moment she saw me, all blonde curls and gap-toothed smile, crashing into my legs with the full force of 4 years old. "Mommy!" I scooped her up, ignoring the protest in my lower back. She smelled like graham crackers and poster paint. "Hi, baby. Did you have a good day?" "We made rainbows, with cotton balls. Mine is in my cubby, but Miss Sarah said I can bring it home tomorrow. I can't wait to see it." She chattered the entire walk to our apartment. About rainbows, about her friend Zoe, about the book Miss Sarah had read about a caterpillar who ate too much. I made appropriate noises, asked follow-up questions, let her voice fill the space where my exhaustion lived. Our building was a 6-story walk-up with a broken intercom and a landlord who fixed things only when the city forced him to. We lived on the 4th floor. Studio apartment, 400 square feet, 1 window that faced the brick wall of the building next door. Rent was $1,300 a month. I was 2 weeks late on this month's payment. The landlord had started leaving voicemails. I unlocked the door and Lily tumbled inside, already shedding her jacket and shoes. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Bed folded up against the wall. A Murphy bed I'd bought off Craigslist for $200. Lily's toddler bed in the corner, covered with a quilt my mother had made before she died. Kitchenette with 2 burners and a refrigerator that hummed too loudly. Bathroom the size of a closet. Everything we owned, contained in a space smaller than Mrs. Chen's walk-in closet. But it was ours, and it was clean. I made sure of that. "Can we have pancakes?" Lily asked, climbing onto the futon that served as our couch. I checked the cabinets. Pancake mix, nearly empty. Eggs, 3 left. Syrup, enough for 1 more meal. "Sure, baby." I made her pancakes while she watched cartoons on the tablet I'd bought on a payment plan. $13 a month for 2 years. Worth it to keep her entertained while I worked from home on the rare occasions I could. We ate together on the futon, her legs tucked under mine, syrup on her chin. This was my favorite part of the day, the part where nothing was broken yet, where Lily was fed and safe and happy, where I could pretend we were fine. After dinner, I gave her a bath in our narrow tub, washed her hair with the cheap shampoo that didn't quite rinse clean, dried her with a towel worn thin from too many washes. She put on her pajamas, hand-me-downs from a coworker's daughter, and climbed into her bed without argument. "Story?" she asked, holding up a picture book we'd read at least 100 times. "Always." I read to her until her eyes drifted shut. Kissed her forehead, pulled the quilt up to her chin. Then I sat on the futon in the dark and looked at the ceiling, water-stained, cracked in the corner near the window. The heater rattled when it worked, which was only about 70% of the time. My bank account had $127 in it. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Electric bill was overdue. Lily needed new shoes. And in 2 weeks, I had another custody hearing. Philip wanted more time. 50-50 custody instead of every other weekend. His lawyer argued he had stability. A home. A wife. Resources. I had a studio with mold and a job scrubbing toilets. Any judge would see what I saw. I pulled my knees to my chest and rested my forehead on them. I didn't cry. I'd learned not to. Crying didn't pay bills, didn't fix anything, just made my eyes puffy and gave me a headache I couldn't afford Advil for. I had 2 weeks to prove I was a fit mother. I had no idea how. 2 days later, I stood in a laundry room that smelled like fabric softener and money, watching my daughter play with a doll that had seen better years, and tried to convince myself that bringing her to work was fine. Normal. Perfectly acceptable. It wasn't. Little Explorers had closed for some minor holiday I'd never heard of. President's Day observance, the email had said. I'd stared at that email for 10 minutes, recalculating my day, my options, my complete lack of backup childcare. Rosie had her own grandkids. My neighbors barely knew my name. There was no one, so I'd called Mrs. Cordell, my Friday client in Tribeca, and asked, voice steady, professional, if it would be possible to bring my daughter. Just this once, she'd be quiet, wouldn't touch anything. I'd work twice as fast. Mrs. Cordell had hesitated. I'd heard it in the silence, the way she'd drawn a breath before answering. But she'd said yes, with conditions. She stays in the laundry room, Claire. I'm sorry, but I have items that are very valuable, and I can't have distractions. Do you understand? I understood. I understood perfectly. The laundry room was off the kitchen, behind a door that stayed closed. It was large, larger than most people's kitchens. Washer and dryer built into custom cabinetry, sink made of some kind of composite stone, a folding table that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Everything in shades of white and gray, sterile and expensive. Lily sat on the floor with her doll, humming to herself. She was good at being quiet. She'd had to learn. I'd been working for 90 minutes, living room completed, baseboards wiped, furniture dusted. I was in the kitchen now, cleaning the interior of the refrigerator, when I heard the doorbell. Mrs. Cordell answered. I heard her voice, bright and welcoming, the voice she used for people who mattered. Then I heard his voice. Philip. My hands stopped moving. The sponge dripped lemon-scented water onto the shelf I'd been wiping. Jennifer, thank you so much for having me, he was saying. Warm. Charming. Professor Philip Ashford, beloved faculty member, father of the year, man who'd rebuilt his life after his unstable ex-wife had made everything so difficult. I wanted to close the refrigerator, walk into the laundry room, lock the door, pretend I wasn't there, but I could hear them moving closer, toward the kitchen. Richard mentioned you might stop by, Mrs. Cordell said. He's still at the university, but he should be back by 11. No rush. I'm between classes. Thought I'd drop off that book he asked about. They were in the kitchen now. I didn't turn, kept my back to them, my hands moving mechanically, wiping down a shelf that was already clean. Oh, Mrs. Cordell said. Her voice had changed, uncomfortable. Claire, I didn't realize you'd be in here. I turned slowly, pulled off my rubber gloves, faced them. Philip stood in the doorway, wearing the uniform he'd perfected over the last year. Dark jeans, blazer over a button-down shirt, glasses with the tortoiseshell frames his new wife had picked out. He looked good, rested, like a man who slept through the night and ate regular meals, and didn't spend his evenings calculating which bills could be delayed another week. He looked at me. His expression shifted. Surprise, carefully arranged. Claire. Philip. Mrs. Cordell glanced between us. I saw the moment she understood. Her eyes widened slightly. Her mouth opened, closed. I didn't know you worked here, Philip said. That was a lie. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. Something in the way he held himself, the way his gaze moved past me, to the bucket of cleaning supplies on the counter. I clean houses, I said. My voice came out steady. I was grateful for that. Mrs. Cordell is one of my clients. I see. He said, a book on the kitchen island. Hardcover, academic press, the kind of book he'd always brought home, the kind we discussed over dinner in our old life. And you brought Lily? My spine stiffened. Her daycare is closed today. I see, he said again. His tone hadn't changed, still polite, still warm, but there was something underneath it now, something sharp. Mrs. Cordell shifted her weight. Claire, perhaps you should. I'd love to see her, Philip said, if that's all right. It wasn't a question. I didn't move. She's playing. I don't want to disturb her. I'm sure she'd want to see her father. The words hung in the air. Her father. Gain her from him. As if I was the obstacle. Before I could respond, I heard the laundry room door open. Small footsteps on tile. Mommy, I'm thirsty. Lily stopped in the kitchen doorway, saw Philip. Her face transformed. Daddy. She ran to him. He caught her, lifted her, and for a moment his expression softened into something real. He loved her. I'd never doubted that. He loved her the way he loved everything else in his life, as a reflection of himself, proof of his goodness, his success. Hi, sweetheart, he said, holding her against his chest. What are you doing here? Mommy's working. I'm playing in the laundry room. I'm very quiet. I'm sure you are. He looked at me over her head. You bring our daughter to your cleaning jobs? I felt the temperature in the room drop. Mrs. Cordell had gone very still. Her daycare was closed, I said. It's one day. One day. He set Lily down, but kept his hand on her shoulder. Do you see how this looks, Claire? Philip, this isn't the time. Our daughter sitting in a laundry room while you scrub other people's floors. His voice was still calm, still reasonable. That was worse somehow. Do you think that's a healthy environment? I'm providing for her. You're dragging her to work because you can't afford proper childcare. Mrs. Cordell made a small sound. Not quite a gasp, just an intake of breath. I felt my face heat. I can afford childcare. I have childcare. Today was an exception. Was it? He glanced at Mrs. Cordell. Jennifer, I apologize for this. I know you didn't expect. Dr. Ashford, Mrs. Cordell said, her voice strained. Perhaps we should. He ignored her, looked back at me. My lawyer has been documenting your living situation. The studio apartment, the neighborhood, the fact that you're working 60 hours a week and still behind on rent. My breath caught. How do you? I'm concerned, Claire. Any reasonable person would be concerned. Our daughter deserves stability, a home, not a rotating series of other people's houses. Lily was looking between us, her expression confused. She didn't understand the words, but she felt the tension. I saw it in the way she pressed closer to Philip's leg. Sweetheart, Philip said, crouching down to Lily's level. Would you like to come spend the whole week with Daddy? You could sleep in your big room, play in the yard. What do you think? Can Mommy come too? Something flickered across his face. Mommy has to work, baby. I found my voice. Lily, go back to the laundry room. She looked at me. I tried to soften my expression, but my jaw was tight, my hands clenched at my sides. Go on, baby. I'll bring you water in a minute. She went, slowly, looking back twice. When the door closed behind her, I turned to Philip, kept my voice low. Don't do this here. Do what? Express concern for my daughter's welfare? He straightened, looked at Mrs. Cordell. You see what I'm dealing with. The inability to accept help. Mrs. Cordell's face was tight. I think you both should. My lawyer will be filing a motion for emergency custody revision, Philip said, still looking at me. We have documentation, photographs of your apartment, records of missed rent payments, testimony from your former employer about your instability. That's not. A child shouldn't be raised like this, Claire. He gestured to my uniform, to the bucket of cleaning supplies. You're a smart woman. You know I'm right. Let me give her the life she deserves. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. Everything in me wanted to scream, to lunge at him, to claw that reasonable expression off his face. But Mrs. Cordell was watching. The motorist I'd seen in the hallway earlier was probably still within earshot. Everything I did here would be documented, used against me. Philip picked up his book. I should go. Jennifer, please give Richard my best. Tell him I'll call about that conference next month. Of course, she said faintly. He walked past me, stopped at the doorway. Think about what's best for Lily, Claire. That's all I'm asking. Then he was gone. The silence he left behind was suffocating. Mrs. Cordell caught her throat. Claire, I think perhaps you should take the rest of the day off. It wasn't a suggestion. Of course, I said. My voice sounded hollow. I'll just get my things. I walked to the laundry room. Lily was sitting on the floor again, holding her doll. She looked up when I entered. Are we leaving? Yes, baby. Did I do something wrong? No. I crouched down, eye level with her, made myself smile. You were perfect. We just need to go now. I gathered our things, My bag, her jacket, the water bottle I'd packed that morning. Mrs. Cordell was nowhere to be seen when we left. I let myself out through the service entrance. The street was bright. Too bright. I held Lily's hand and walked toward the subway without seeing anything. Mommy, why is Daddy mad? I stopped walking, looked down at her. Her blonde curls were tangled, her jacket buttoned wrong. 4 years old. She should have been worrying about cartoons and snacks, not adult anger she couldn't name. He's not mad, baby. About what? About you. About making sure you're happy. She considered this. I am happy. I pulled her close, pressed my face into her hair. I know. But Philip had won. Again. He'd humiliated me in front of a witness who'd seen me as exactly what he'd described. The unstable ex-wife who couldn't provide. The mother who brought her daughter to cleaning jobs because she had no other options. And he'd done it all with a smile. I took Lily to Battery Park because I didn't know where else to go. The apartment felt too small, the walls pressing in. I couldn't think there, couldn't breathe. And Lily needed space to run, to forget the tension she'd absorbed in that Tribeca kitchen, even if she didn't understand it. It was cold. February in New York. The kind of cold that cut through cheap coats and settled into bones. The park was nearly empty. A few runners on the path. An old man feeding pigeons near the water. The playground sat vacant, swings moving slightly in the wind. Lily ran ahead, her jacket flapping open. I should have told her to zip it. Should have worried about her getting sick. But I was too tired to worry about one more thing. I sat on a bench near the playground, watching her climb the structure. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, from rage, from humiliation, from the helpless knowledge that Philip was right about one thing. I couldn't fight him. Not with money, not with lawyers, not with character witnesses who'd believe a respected professor over the woman who cleaned houses. I pressed my palms against my eyes, tried to think. There had to be something I could do. Some way to prove I was stable, capable, enough. But I'd been trying to prove that for 11 months, and I was further behind than when I'd started. A presence shifted at the edge of my awareness, the way the air changes when someone enters a room. I dropped my hands, looked up. 2 men stood at the playground entrances, both wearing dark suits, hands clasped in front of them. They weren't looking at the playground. They were looking outward, scanning. Security stances, professional. I glanced around. The mothers who'd been near the benches were gathering their children, moving away quickly. Not running, just leaving with purpose, the way people do when they sense something wrong. The park felt different now. Quieter, emptier. I stood, instinct screaming at me to get Lily and go. But before I could call to her, she came running over. Mommy, I'm cold. I reached for her hand. Okay, baby, let's go. Mrs. Ashford. The voice came from behind me, male, deep, calm. I turned. He stood 5 feet away, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to see his face. Tall, 6'2", maybe taller. Shoulders broad enough to block the winter sun. He wore a charcoal wool coat that looked like it had been tailored specifically for him, and probably had. Eyes so dark they were almost black. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not friendly, not unfriendly, just focused, the way a surgeon might look at an incision. My body recognized danger before my brain did. Every muscle tensed. I'm sorry, I said, pulling Lily closer. Do I know you? No. The word hung between us. No explanation, no elaboration. I waited. He didn't speak. Then how do you know my name? He ignored the question. You left Mrs. Cordell's residence 40 minutes ago. You haven't eaten. Your daughter is cold. Ice flooded my veins. Have you been following me? You need to sit down. I need to leave. I turned, gripping Lily's hand tighter. I know Philip Ashford. I stopped, turned back slowly. What did you say? Your ex-husband. I know him. My heart was pounding now, hard enough that I felt it in my throat. Who are you? Someone who doesn't like what I saw this morning. You were there? My voice rose. At the house? You were watching? He won't file the emergency custody motion. The statement landed like a stone. Flat. Certain. How do you know that? He won't. I stared at him. He stared back. No discomfort in his gaze. No need to explain himself. Just that same focused intensity, like I was a problem he'd already solved. I don't understand, I said. Who are you? What do you want? He glanced down at Lily, who was pressed against my leg, watching him with wide eyes. Something in his expression shifted, softened, almost imperceptibly. There's a cafe 3 blocks north. It's warm. They have hot chocolate. We're fine. You're not. The words were matter of fact, not unkind, just true. I lifted my chin. Thank you for your concern, but we need to go. I turned again, pulling Lily with me. Made it 3 steps before he spoke again. The cafe, Lombardi's, 3 blocks north on Greenwich. I didn't respond, didn't look back, just kept walking, my grip tight on Lily's hand. Behind me I heard footsteps, not following, moving away, the sound of a car door opening. I glanced back despite myself. A black SUV was parked at the curb. Tinted windows, the 2 men in suits were already inside. He stood beside the open rear door, his hand resting on the frame. He was watching me. Met across the empty playground. He didn't wave, didn't nod, just looked at me for 3 seconds, then got into the vehicle. The door closed, the SUV pulled away, smooth and silent. I stood frozen, Lily tugging at my hand. "Mommy, who was that man?" "I don't know, baby." But even as I said it, I saw something on the bench where I'd been sitting. A small rectangle of white against the dark wood. I walked back slowly, picked it up. A business card. Heavy stock, expensive, cream-colored with black text. Dante Ravenna. Below the name, a phone number. Handwritten in black ink. Nothing else. No company, no title, just a name and a number. Dante Ravenna. The name sounded Italian, old world. It didn't match the SUV or the suits, or the way he'd appeared out of nowhere and made statements about my life like he had the right. I should have thrown the card away. Should have gone to the police. Should have been terrified. I was terrified, but I also felt something else. Something I hadn't felt in 14 months. Possibility. This man, whoever he was, had said Philip wouldn't file the motion. He'd said it with the kind of certainty that came from knowledge, not hope. Like he'd already handled it. Like it was done. I looked at the card again. The handwriting was precise, controlled. The same way he'd stood, the same way he'd spoken. Lily was shivering beside me. "Mommy, can we go home now?" "Yes, baby." I put the card in my wallet, slipped it between a grocery receipt and Lily's insurance card. Told myself I'd throw it away later. I didn't throw it away. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat on the futon in the dark and pulled out the card. Ran my thumb over the raised letters of his name. Dante Ravenna. I'd memorized the number by the 3rd time I looked at it. 10 digits that felt like a lifeline I didn't understand and shouldn't trust. Men who appeared out of nowhere didn't help people for free. Men who knew your name without introduction, who had security details in SUVs with tinted windows, who spoke about Ivy League professors like they were minor inconveniences to be managed. Those men wanted something. I just didn't know what yet. But as I sat there in my studio apartment with its water-stained ceiling and broken heater, with 14 days until a custody hearing I couldn't win and a bank account that wouldn't cover next month's rent, I realized something. I didn't care what he wanted. If Dante Ravenna could make Philip back down, could give me even a small chance of keeping my daughter, I'd pay whatever price he asked. I put the card back in my wallet, lay down on the futon, stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in 40 minutes, I let myself believe that maybe, I wasn't completely alone in this. The card stayed in my wallet. I didn't call the number, didn't throw it away. A small weight I felt every time I opened my wallet to count bills, or show Lily's insurance card, or pay for groceries with money I didn't have. 3 days passed. Philip didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at the apartment for his scheduled visit with Lily on Sunday. His lawyer didn't file any motions. I checked the court website obsessively, refreshed it every few hours. Nothing appeared. On the 4th day, I called Philip's lawyer directly. The receptionist put me through to voicemail. I left a message asking about the emergency custody motion. He didn't call back. On the 5th day, Rosie asked me what was wrong while we restocked supplies in the Elite Home Services van. "Nothing," I said. "You've checked your phone 14 times in the last hour. That's not nothing." I shoved a bottle of floor cleaner into the cabinet. Philip was supposed to file something with the court. He hasn't. And that's bad? I don't know what it is. Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then, maybe he changed his mind. Philip doesn't change his mind. He plans. He executes. He wins. Maybe he lost this time. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe Philip had suddenly developed a conscience, or gotten distracted, or decided I was worth leaving alone. But I kept thinking about the man in the park, the calm certainty in his voice when he'd said, he won't file the motion, like it was already decided, like he'd decided it. I touched my wallet through my bag, felt the shape of the card inside. Maybe, I said, but I didn't believe it. 3 weeks passed. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Philip to show up at my door with police and social workers, for the court to notify me of an emergency hearing, for something to shatter the fragile quiet that had settled over my life. Nothing happened. Philip picked up Lily on schedule, every other Saturday. The exchanges were wordless. He'd arrive exactly on time, take Lily's overnight bag from my hands, without meeting my eyes, and leave. When he brought her back on Sunday evenings, the routine reversed. No conversation, no threats, nothing. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like standing on ice, waiting for the crack. The first week, I convinced myself it was temporary. Philip was regrouping, planning a different strategy. Dare. The second week, my court-appointed lawyer called. The motion for emergency custody revision was withdrawn, he said. He sounded as confused as I felt. Philip Ashford's attorney filed a notice of withdrawal. No explanation. What does that mean? It means the hearing stays as scheduled, 2 weeks from now. Standard custody review, nothing expedited. Did something change? I don't know. Well, whatever you did, keep doing it. I hung up and stared at the card in my wallet for 20 minutes. By the third week, I'd stopped expecting disaster. Started breathing normally again. Let myself believe that maybe, somehow, I'd caught a break. Then the letter arrived. It came on a Saturday morning, delivered by certified mail. I had to sign for it, which meant it was important, legal, the kind of thing that required proof of delivery. Lily was eating cereal at the small table we'd wedged into the corner of the studio. I waited until she was distracted by her tablet before I opened the envelope. The letterhead belonged to a law firm I didn't recognize. Morrison, Ketchum & Valdez. Corporate. The kind of firm that charged $1,000 an hour and had offices in glass towers. I scanned the first paragraph, then read it again, slower, because the words didn't make sense. Notice of child welfare investigation request on behalf of concerned party. Allegations of inadequate living conditions. Exposure of minor child to inappropriate work environments. Financial instability indicating inability to provide basic necessities. Request for immediate evaluation by Child Protective Services. My hands started shaking. This wasn't Philip's usual lawyer. This was someone bigger, more expensive, more dangerous. The letter continued. I was being given 10 days to respond to the allegations. If I failed to respond, or if the response was deemed insufficient, CPS would be contacted to conduct a home evaluation. The results would be submitted to the family court judge overseeing my custody case. 10 days. I looked at the date on the letter. It had been sent 4 days ago. Delivered today. I had 6 days left. The paper crumpled in my grip. I smoothed it out, read it a third time. The allegations were specific. Too specific. Photographs of my apartment building. Documentation of late rent payments. A statement from an unnamed witness who'd observed me bringing Lily to a work site. Mrs. Cordell. It had to be. Philip had asked her, or his lawyers had, and she'd complied because why wouldn't she? I was just the woman who claimed her house. I stood up too fast. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the counter until my vision steadied. Mommy, are you okay? Lily was looking at me, spoon halfway to her mouth. I forced a smile. I'm fine, baby. Just remembered something I forgot to do. She accepted this and returned to her cereal. I walked to the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub, and tried to think. I could call my court-appointed lawyer, but he was overworked and underpaid, handling 30 cases at once. He'd told me himself he had no availability for 2 weeks. This letter required a response in 6 days. I could try to respond myself, but I didn't know the legal language, didn't know what would help versus what would make things worse. I could ignore it. Let CPS come. Let them see the studio apartment with its mold problem and broken heater and Murphy bed. Let them write their report and submit it to the judge. That wasn't a choice. That was surrender. My wallet was on the sink counter where I'd left it that morning. I pulled it out, opened it. The card was still there, cream-colored, expensive, a name and a number in precise handwriting. I'd looked at that card every day for 3 weeks, touched it, memorized the number, told myself I'd never use it. I pulled out my phone, put it down, picked it up again. This was insane. I didn't know this man, didn't know what he wanted, what he'd ask for in return. Men like him didn't help people out of kindness. There was always a price. But what choice did I have? I dialed 4 numbers, stopped, set the phone on the counter, stared at myself in the mirror. I looked like I'd aged 5 years in 3 weeks. Circles under my eyes, cheekbones too sharp, hair that needed cutting. This was who I'd become. The woman who was so desperate she'd consider calling a stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere and promised to fix her life. I picked up the phone again, dialed 8 numbers this time, stopped, put the phone down. This went on for 3 days. Monday night, I held the phone in my hand for 45 minutes, typed the full number into the dial pad, stared at the call button, deleted it. Tuesday night, I made it to 9 digits before my nerve failed. Wednesday, I didn't try at all, just carried the phone around like a weight, the card burning a hole in my wallet. I tried everything else first, called the court-appointed lawyer's office, left 2 messages. He didn't call back. Searched online for low-cost legal aid, found 3 organizations. 2 had waiting lists of 6 months. The third said they didn't handle custody cases. On the letter, their consultation fee was $1,500. I had $89 in my bank account. Thursday night, I sat at the table after Lily was asleep and tried to draft a response to the letter myself. Spent 2 hours writing and rewriting, knowing everything I typed sounded defensive and desperate. Because I was defensive and desperate. I had 2 days left. Friday night, Lily had a cough. Not terrible, but enough that I had to buy children's cough syrup. $24 at the pharmacy. I stood at the register for 30 seconds before handing over my debit card, praying it wouldn't decline. It didn't. But now I had $65 until next Friday's paycheck. The rent was due in 8 days. I was already 2 weeks late. The landlord had started leaving voicemails that were less friendly and more threatening. I walked home from the pharmacy with Lily's hand in mine, the medication in a paper bag, and felt the full weight of how completely I'd failed. I couldn't afford a lawyer, couldn't afford rent, could barely afford to feed my daughter. And in 2 days, I'd have to explain to a judge why any of that made me a fit parent. That night, I gave Lily her medicine, read her 2 stories instead of 1, tucked her in and kissed her forehead, and told her I loved her. Then I sat on the floor of the kitchen with the letter in one hand and my phone in the other. It was 11:47 at night. I had 36 hours to respond to the letter. I had no options left. I'd spent 3 weeks telling myself I didn't need help. 3 weeks being too proud to make a phone call to a man who'd offered something I didn't understand. I was out of time for pride. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the number. Typed it in. Every digit felt like a surrender. The phone rang once. Claire. My breath caught. He'd answered on the first ring, at midnight, and he knew it was me. How did you? What happened? Not a question, a demand. His voice was exactly as I remembered. Deep, calm, controlled. I opened my mouth, closed it. I'd planned what to say, rehearsed it a dozen times in my head, but now that he was on the phone, the words tangled. I got a letter, I finally managed, from a law firm. They're requesting a CPS investigation. I have to respond in 2 days and I don't know how, and my lawyer won't call me back, and I can't afford anyone else, and Stop. I stopped. Silence on the line. Not empty. I could hear him breathing. Hear something in the background, maybe traffic. Send me a picture of the letter. I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. Send it. My throat was tight. Why are you helping me? Send the letter, Claire. I pulled the phone away from my ear, opened the camera, photographed the letter with shaking hands, sent it. 5 seconds of silence. Then, I'll handle it. You don't understand. This is a major law firm. They want CPS to evaluate my apartment. They have witness statements. I don't know how you could. I said I'll handle it. The certainty in his voice was absolute. The same certainty he'd had in the park when he'd said Philip wouldn't file the motion. And Philip hadn't. Okay, I whispered. Lock your door. Sleep. I'll call you in the morning. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. The line went quiet again. But he hadn't hung up. I could still hear him there, waiting. Claire, yes, you did the right thing. Calling. Something in my chest loosened. Just slightly, just enough to breathe. Okay. Get some sleep. He hung up. I sat on the kitchen floor for 10 near minutes, phone in my hand, staring at nothing. I'd just asked a stranger for help. A man I didn't know, didn't understand, who had resources and power I couldn't comprehend. I should have been terrified. Instead, for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I locked the door like he'd told me to, checked it twice, lay down on the futon, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. I didn't sleep, but I didn't spiral either, because somewhere in this city, Dante Ravenna was handling it. And somehow, impossibly, I believed him. He called at 8 in the morning. I'd been awake since 6, sitting at the table with cold coffee, watching my phone. Lily was still asleep, her breathing soft and steady from the corner of the room. When the phone rang, I answered before the first ring finished. Claire. Just my name. but the way he said it felt like a hand on my shoulder, steadying. The investigation request was withdrawn. The lawyer who filed it no longer represents your ex-husband. I couldn't speak. The words hung in the air. Impossible. How? I need you to come to my office, this afternoon. My brain was still catching up. Why? There's a solution, but it requires your presence. I don't understand. What kind of solution? 2 o'clock. I'll send you the address. I have Lily today. It's Saturday. Bring her. He hung up before I could respond. 3 seconds later, a text arrived. An address in Tribeca. Nothing else. I stared at the phone, tried to process what he'd just told me. The investigation was withdrawn. The lawyer was gone. In less than 8 hours, Dante Ravenna had made a problem that should have destroyed me simply disappear. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt the weight of debt I didn't know how to repay. The address led to a building I'd walked past 100 times without noticing. Red brick, pre-war, restored with the kind of money that didn't announce itself. A small brass plaque beside the entrance read Ravenna Imports in elegant script. I stood on the sidewalk for 30 seconds, Lily's hand in mine, trying to convince myself to go inside. Is this where your friend works? Lily asked. He's not my friend, baby. He's just someone who's helping Mommy. Why? Good question. I pushed open the door. The lobby was small. Marble floors, exposed brick walls, a reception desk made of dark wood. A woman sat behind it, mid-30s, wearing a headset and typing with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. She looked up as we entered, smiled. Miss Ashford, Mr. Ravenna is expecting you. 5th floor. I hadn't given my name. She gestured to the elevator, pulled a key from her desk drawer and handed it to me. You'll need this. The elevator was old-fashioned, the kind with brass fixtures and a gate that folded across. I inserted the key, turned it. The elevator hummed to life. Lily pressed herself against my leg as we rose. Mommy, this is fancy. It was. Everything about this building whispered money, not the loud kind that came with chandeliers and gold fixtures, the quiet kind. The kind that had been here for generations and would be here for generations more. The elevator opened directly into an office. Not a hallway, not a waiting room, just straight into a large space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. The floors were dark hardwood. The furniture was minimal, a desk made of something that looked like walnut, a leather sofa, bookshelves filled with what looked like wine bottles in wooden crates, labels in Italian, and Dante Ravenna, standing beside the window with a phone to his ear. He was wearing a suit, charcoal gray, no tie, the first button of his white shirt undone. He looked different than he had in the park, less like a threat, more like a man who belonged in rooms like this, but his presence still filled the space the same way, commanding without effort. He saw us, said something quick into the phone in a language I didn't recognize, Italian probably, then ended the call. Claire. He didn't smile, didn't move toward us, just acknowledged my presence with the same intensity he'd had in the park, like I was the only thing in the room worth his attention. Mr. Ravenna. Dante. It wasn't a request, it was a correction. Lily was staring at him with wide eyes. He looked down at her, and something in his expression shifted, softened just enough to be noticeable. Hello, Lily. She pressed closer to me. Before the silence could stretch too long, a door I hadn't noticed opened. A woman walked in, tall and striking, with long black hair and the kind of bone structure that belonged on magazine covers. She wore a silk blouse, the color of sapphires, and moved with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. She looked at me, then at Dante, raised one eyebrow. So this is Claire. Her voice carried a slight accent, Italian, like Dante's had been on the phone. Gabriella, Dante said. My sister. Of course she was. They had the same eyes, the same way of looking at people, like they could see straight through polite masks. Gabriella ignored me and crouched in front of Lily. And you must be Lily. Do you like hot chocolate? Lenny glanced up at me. I didn't know what to say. There's a cafe downstairs, Gabriella continued. They make it with real chocolate, the kind that's too good for adults. Want to see? Can I, Mommy? Every instinct I had screamed not to let my daughter leave with a stranger. But Dante was watching me, and something in his expression told me this wasn't a request. This was part of whatever arrangement he'd set in motion. Okay, I heard myself say, but just for a few minutes. Gabriella stood, held out her hand. Lily took it after a moment's hesitation. We'll be back in 20 minutes, Gabriella said. She looked at Dante, said something in Italian. He responded with a single word. She smiled, shook her head, and led Lily to the elevator. The silence after they left was heavy. I turned to face Dante. He was watching me with that same unreadable expression. "You didn't need to send her away," I said. "Yes, I did. Sit." It wasn't phrased as a request, but I sat anyway, on the leather sofa that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. He didn't sit behind his desk. Instead, he took the chair beside me, close enough that I could smell whatever cologne he wore. Something expensive, woodsy. "The law firm that sent you the letter received a call yesterday," he said, "from a colleague of mine. The investigation request has been withdrawn. Philip Ashford is no longer their client. They've been advised that pursuing this matter further would be professionally unwise." I stared at him. "I made a phone call. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." I wanted to push, to demand details, but something in his tone told me I wouldn't get them. "What do you want from me?" I asked instead. He tilted his head slightly. "Want? Men don't do favors like this for free, so what's the cost? What do I owe you?" For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "You don't owe me anything." "I don't believe that." "Then believe this. I don't like men who use power to hurt people who can't fight back. Your ex-husband is that kind of man. I'm not. You just made a law firm drop a client with one phone call. That's power." "Yes. No denial, no false modesty, just acknowledgement." I should have been afraid, should have gotten up and walked out. But I was so tired of being afraid. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair, studied me for a long moment. "I import wine from Italy. 6 shipments per month. Each shipment has documentation in Italian that needs to be translated for customs, distributors, and restaurants." I blinked. "You need a translator." "I need someone I trust." "You don't know me. I know enough. You know I clean houses. That doesn't qualify me to translate legal documents." "You taught literature. You have a master's degree in comparative languages from Columbia. You specialized in Italian Renaissance poetry. You're overqualified." My breath caught. "How do you know that?" He didn't answer, didn't need to. Of course he'd looked into me. Men like him didn't make moves without information. "The pay is $4,000 per month," he continued. "You work here. 4 days a week, 9 to 4. Lily stays in the next room. I had it prepared yesterday." I couldn't speak. $4,000, that was more than I made cleaning houses in 2 months. That was rent and groceries, and Lily's daycare, and maybe enough left over to prove to a judge that I was stable. "Why are you doing this?" I asked again. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the water. "When I was 12, a man tried to take my sisters from me. Said I was too young, unstable, not a fit guardian. He was a judge. He had all the power." He paused. I didn't breathe. "Someone helped me. A man who had no reason to care, but he did, and because of him I kept my family together." He turned back to face me. "I'm helping you because someone once helped me. That's all." It wasn't all, I knew that, but it was all he was going to give me right now. "I'll do the work," I said. "I'll earn the salary, but I won't take charity." Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe. "I'm not offering charity, I'm offering a job. If the work isn't good, you're fired." "When do I start?" "Monday." The elevator opened. Gabriella returned with Lily, who had chocolate on her chin and was chattering about the cafe. Smiled slightly, then spoke to me, her voice low enough that Lily wouldn't hear. "If you hurt him, I'll know." I stared at her. "Hurt him?" "He doesn't let people in. You're in. Don't waste it." Before I could respond, she turned to Dante, said something in Italian that made him respond with what sounded like exasperation, and headed for the door. "Monday," Dante said to me. 9 o'clock. I stood, took Lily's hand. "Don't thank me yet, the work is difficult." But that wasn't what I was thanking him for, and we both knew it. In the elevator, Lily looked up at me. "Mommy, is Mr. Ravenna your new boss?" I thought about that, about the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd made problems disappear with a phone call, the way he'd created a job that felt less like employment and more like a lifeline. "Something like that," I said, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Dante Ravenna wasn't my boss. He was something else entirely. I just didn't know what yet. I arrived at 8:55 on Monday morning, my heart beating too fast. The office looked exactly as it had on Saturday. Same windows, same view, same expensive quietness. But now there was a difference. The door beside Dante's desk stood open, revealing a room I hadn't noticed before. I walked to the doorway. Stopped. Someone had transformed the space. A small desk sat near the window, sleek and modern. A computer, already on. A bookshelf filled with children's books, their spines bright and new. A soft rug in shades of cream and gray. A toy box in the corner, overflowing with dolls and blocks and puzzles. Lily gasped behind me. "Mommy, is this for me?" I couldn't answer. My throat had closed. "Yes." Dante's voice came from behind us. I turned. He was standing in the doorway of his office, wearing another suit. This one charcoal, with a white shirt. No tie again. He looked at Lily, not me. "You'll stay here while your mother works. The books are yours to keep." Lily looked at me for permission. I managed to nod. She ran inside, immediately gravitating toward the toy box. I faced Dante. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did." He walked to my desk, gestured to a coffee cup sitting beside the computer. "Coffee. Milk, no sugar." Stared at the cup. Then at him. "How did you know?" "I saw you at the cafe near Lily's daycare. Twice. You ordered the same thing both times." He'd been watching me, before the park, before any of this. The realization should have unsettled me. Instead, I felt something else, something like being seen. "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded once, returned to his office. I sat at my desk, opened the first document he'd left for me. An invoice from a vineyard in Tuscany, dense with technical language about aging processes and appellations. I lost myself in the work, translating carefully, checking terminology I hadn't used since graduate school. By the third day, I'd stopped being nervous. By the fifth, I realized he'd been watching me work. Not hovering, just aware. I'd look up from my screen and catch him glancing through his open door. He never looked away when I caught him, just held my gaze for a beat before returning to whatever he was doing. It should have made me uncomfortable. It didn't. 2 weeks in, Dante appeared at my desk at 12:30, set down a paper bag. "You haven't eaten." I looked up from the shipping manifest I was translating. "I brought a sandwich." "You brought crackers and an apple. That's not lunch." He was right. I'd been trying to stretch groceries until Friday. "Lily ate," I said. "I know, Gabriella brought sandwiches an hour ago, but you didn't eat with her." Of course he knew. He knew everything that happened in this office. I opened the bag. Inside was pasta from the Italian restaurant on the ground floor. The smell alone made my stomach clench with hunger I'd been ignoring. "Eat," he said, and walked away before I could thank him. It became a pattern. 3 times a week, lunch appeared on my desk. Always from his restaurant. Always exactly at 12:30. I stopped protesting after the second week. By the third week, Gabriella had become a regular presence. She'd arrive on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sweep into the office like she owned it, which technically, she probably did, and take Lily downstairs to see the kitchen, or the wine cellar, or the bakery next door. On a Thursday in my 4th week, she lingered after returning Lily to her room, leaned against my desk. "So, Lily's father, he sees her?" I looked up from my translation. "Every other weekend. Court order." Dante mentioned he's a professor. My hands paused on the keyboard. "Dante talks about me?" Gabriella smiled. "More than he thinks." "What does he say?" "That you work too hard, that you don't eat enough, that Lily is smart and you're afraid." She tilted her head. "Are you? Afraid?" "Of what?" "Of this, of him, of letting someone help you." I looked toward Dante's office. He was on the phone, his back to us, speaking rapid Italian. "I don't know how to not be afraid," I admitted. "Then you're smarter than you look." Gabriella straightened. "But for what it's worth, I've never seen my brother like this." "Like what?" "Careful. He's never careful. But with you, he is." She left before I could ask what that meant. A month in, I was working late. Not intentionally. I'd gotten absorbed in a complex contract and lost track of time. When I finally looked up, it was 6:30. "Lily." I shot out of my chair, panic flooding through me. But when I looked into her room, she wasn't there. I found her in Dante's office, asleep on his leather sofa, covered with his suit jacket. He was at his desk, working on his laptop, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked up when I appeared. "She fell asleep an hour ago. I didn't want to wake her." I stared at the jacket covering her. Cashmere, probably worth more than my monthly salary. He tucked it around her shoulders carefully, making sure she was warm. "I'm sorry, I lost track of time." "Don't apologize, the work is good." I walked to the sofa, looked down at my daughter, her face peaceful in sleep. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for this, all of it. It's just a jacket. It's not just a jacket. He didn't respond. When I looked at him, he was watching me with that focused intensity I'd started to recognize, like he was cataloging details, memorizing. You should go home, he said. I'll drive you. You don't have to? I know. But 20 minutes later, we were in the back of his SUV. Lily asleep against my shoulder, Dante beside me in the darkness. His driver navigated through traffic, while we sat in silence, not uncomfortable, just quiet. When we arrived at my building, Dante got out first, opened my door, carried Lily up the 4 flights of stairs without being asked. I unlocked my apartment, hyper-aware of what he was seeing. The studio layout, the Murphy bed, the water stain on the ceiling I'd stopped noticing. He set Lily on her toddler bed, still wrapped in his jacket. Thank you, I said. He looked around the apartment, no judgment in his expression, just observation. You'll need a bigger place. I'm working on it. I know. He left without another word. That night I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about the way he'd carried Lily, the way he'd covered her with his jacket, the way he'd looked at my apartment and said I'd need a bigger place. It was already decided. Like he'd already decided it. 2 months in, everything changed. It was a Tuesday. Lily was downstairs with Gabriella. I was alone in the office with Dante, translating a document about import tariffs. My phone rang. Philip. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Decided I had to. Hello? We need to talk about the custody arrangement. My stomach dropped. What about it? I want to revise it. Add Wednesday overnights. Extend summer visitation. The current arrangement is working fine. For you, maybe. But Lily needs more stability, more time with me. I closed my eyes. Philip, please don't do this. I'm not doing anything except being a father. My lawyer will file the motion next week. He hung up. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. What happened? I looked up. Dante was standing in his doorway. Nothing, just my ex. What did he want? It wasn't a question. I was learning that nothing Dante said was really a question. To change the custody arrangement, more time with Lily. Dante's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted, cooled. His lawyer will file a motion? Next week, that's what he said. No, he won't. The certainty in his voice was absolute. Dante, you can't keep making his problems disappear. Yes, I can. That's not how this works. You can't just, Claire. He said my name quietly, walked to where I sat, looked down at me. Do you trust me? I should have said no, should have said I barely knew him, that trust took tone, that I didn't understand what he did or how he did it. Instead, I said, yes. Something flickered in his eyes. Then let me handle it. He pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke for 3 minutes in Italian, his voice low and hard. When he finished, he looked at me. It's done. What's done? Philip won't file the motion. He won't change the arrangement. He'll stop. How can you possibly? Because I told him to. I stared at him. You called Philip? No, I called someone who'll call Philip. By tomorrow, he'll understand that pursuing this is a bad idea. What does that mean? He crouched in front of my chair, eye level with me, close enough that I could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes. It means you're under my protection now. And people who are under my protection don't get hurt. Do you understand? I should have been terrified, should have demanded to know what kind of man could make threats that actually worked. But all I felt was safe. I understand, I whispered. He stood, returned to his office, left me sitting there, shaking. That night, Gabriella invited us to dinner. Sunday, Dante's apartment. He wants to teach Lily how to make pasta, she said, unless you object. I didn't object. Sunday evening, we stood in Dante's kitchen. His penthouse overlooked the city, all glass and steel and carefully curated emptiness. But the kitchen was warm. Lily stood on a step stool, her hands covered in flour, while Gabriella showed her how to shape gnocchi. Dante stood at the stove, making sauce that smelled like tomatoes and basil, and something I couldn't identify. I watched from the doorway, watched my daughter laugh, watched Dante glance over his shoulder at her, his expression soft in a way I'd never seen. This felt like family. Not the family I'd lost, something new, something I didn't know I was allowed to want. After dinner, Lily fell asleep on Dante's sofa. I moved to wake her. Let her sleep, Dante said. I'll drive you both home in an hour. We stood on his balcony, the city spread out below us, lights glittering. You're good at this, he said. At what? Being here. I looked at him. So are you. He held my gaze. 3 seconds. 4. He didn't say anything, but something between us shifted, and I knew that whatever this was, it wasn't just a job anymore. It happened on a Tuesday. I was translating a contract for a new distributor, Lily playing quietly in her room, when two men walked into the office. They didn't knock, didn't announce themselves, just appeared in the doorway like they'd materialized from nothing. Both wore dark suits, both had the kind of build that came from violence, not gyms, and both had accents that turned my blood cold. Russian. "Where's Ravenna?" The taller one spoke. His English was heavily accented, his eyes flat and calculating as they swept the office. I stood slowly. Every instinct screamed danger. "He's not here. You need to leave." "You tell him Alexei Volkov sends message." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "He has something we want. We take something he wants." His gaze shifted, past me, to the open door of Lily's room. My heart stopped. I moved before I thought, positioning myself between them and that doorway. "Get out." "Pretty," the man said, still looking past me. "Both of you. Pity." A third man appeared. Not Russian, one of Dante's. I'd seen him in the lobby before, always in a dark suit, always watching. He stepped between the Russians and me, his hand inside his jacket. "Out. Now." The Russians didn't move immediately. The tall one looked at me one more time, his smile widening, and he turned and walked toward the elevator. "We will see you again," he called over his shoulder. The elevator doors closed. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the desk. Lily appeared in the doorway. "Mommy? Who were those men?" "No one, baby. Go back to your room." "But, now, Lily." She went, her face crumpling. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers, dialed Dante. He answered on the first ring. "What happened?" Not a question. Never a question. "Two men. Russians. They came here. They said someone named Volkov sent them. They looked at Lily. And they lock the office door. Don't open it for anyone except Gabriella. I'm 8 minutes away." "Dante, what's happening? Who are these people?" 8 minutes. The line went dead. I locked the door, went to Lily's room. She was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees, crying quietly. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean to yell." "You're scared," she whispered. "I can tell." I pulled her into my lap, held her tight. "Everything's going to be okay." It was a lie. I didn't know if anything would be okay ever again. Dante arrived in 6 minutes. I heard the elevator, heard his footsteps, opened the door. He walked straight to me. His hands came up to my face, tilting it toward him. His eyes searched mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "You're okay?" I nodded, couldn't speak. "Lily?" "She's fine." She didn't see them clearly. His jaw tightened. He released me, pulled out his phone and spoke rapid Italian. Hard words, dangerous words. When he finished, he looked at me. "Pack your things. You're not going home tonight." "What? No, we can't just—" "Claire." My name was a command. "Pack. Now." 20 minutes later, we were in his SUV. Another car followed behind us, 2 more of Dante's men inside. Lily sat between us in the back seat, her hand in mine, asking questions I couldn't answer. We drove north, out of the city, into Westchester. The houses grew larger, the streets quieter. We turned onto a private road, stopped in front of a gate that opened automatically. The house was beautiful. Colonial style, white with black shutters, surrounded by trees that hid it from the road. Safe, isolated. Gabriella's car was already in the driveway. She met us at the door, took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "You're safe now." Inside, the house was furnished but impersonal. Like a vacation home that no one actually vacationed in. "This belongs to the family," Gabriella said. "We use it sometimes, for situations like this." "Situations like this?" I repeated numbly. "How often does this happen?" She exchanged a look with Dante. "Often enough that we're prepared." Lily was exhausted. I put her to bed in one of the upstairs rooms, lay beside her until she fell asleep. When I came back down, Gabriella had made tea. "He's outside," she said. "Making calls. Sit." The tea was hot and sweet, and I wrapped my hands around the cup to stop them shaking. "Who are these people?" I asked. "Russians. Bratva. Organized crime." The words should have shocked me. They didn't. I'd known on some level that Dante wasn't just a wine importer. Men who made problems disappear with phone calls, who had security details in safe houses, weren't legitimate businessmen. Why do they want to hurt us? Because hurting what Dante protects is the fastest way to hurt him. Gabriella sipped her tea. "He controls shipping routes through 3 major docks. The Bratva wants access. He won't give it to them. So they apply pressure. By threatening a 4-year-old. Yes. I set down my cup. I need to leave. Lily and we need to go somewhere they can't find us. They'll find you anywhere. Then what am I supposed to do? Gabriella leaned forward. You trust him. Let him fix this. How? By starting a war? If necessary. The door opened. Dante came in, his phone still in his hand. He looked at me, and I saw something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Fear. Not for himself. For me. We need to talk, he said. Gabriella stood. I'll be upstairs. When she was gone, Dante sat across from me. For a long moment he didn't speak. I'm sorry, he finally said. For what? For bringing you into this. For putting you at risk. You didn't know this would happen. I should have anticipated it. Should have protected you better. Dante, you can't control everything. I can control this. He leaned forward. The wine importation is real. The restaurants are real and profitable. But I also control cargo movement through the docks. I launder money. I mediate disputes between families. I'm not legitimate, Claire. I never pretended to be. I know. He looked surprised. You know? I'm not stupid. Men don't have that much power, that much reach from importing wine. I knew. I just didn't want to see it. Why didn't you leave? Because you've never hurt me, never threatened me, never made me feel unsafe until those men walked into your office today. And now? I thought about that. About the Russians and their flat eyes and the way they'd looked at Lily. About the fear that still sat like ice in my chest. Now I'm terrified, I admitted. But not of you. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his expression was raw. I can move you. New city, new name. Money for 3 years more if you need it. A lawyer for the custody case. You and Lily disappear. Safe. My throat tightened. And you? I stay here. I handle this. So I just leave, never see you again? It's safer. For who? He didn't answer. I stood. Walked to the window. Looked out at the dark trees surrounding the house. You said I stopped being just an employee. When? The second week. Why? 'Cause you brought Lily coffee when I was working late. Because you translated a complex contract in half the time it should have taken, and didn't ask for praise. Because you smiled at me once, a real smile, and I wanted to see it again. I turned. He was standing now, his hands in his pockets, watching me. I'm not running, I said. Claire, you said I stopped being just an employee. You were right, but you stopped being just my boss too. And I don't run from people I trust. This isn't about trust, it's about keeping you alive. Then keep me alive here, with you. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. I'm asking you to let me stay. He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to see his face. If you stay, there are no more secrets. If something threatens Lily, you need to know before it happens, not after. Can you live with that? Can you tell me everything? Yes. Then I can live with it. His hand came up, cupped my face. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. I don't want you hurt because of me. I don't want you handling this alone. I've been handling things alone for 25 years. Not anymore. Something in his expression cracked. He leaned down, rested his forehead against mine. We stood like that, breathing the same air, until my phone rang. I pulled it out. Philip, I answered. I heard something happened. Is Lily okay? I froze. How did you hear? She's fine. Where are you? That's none of your business. It is if my daughter is in danger because of whatever mess you've gotten yourself into. Dante took the phone from my hand. This is Dante Ravenna. Lily is safe. Claire is safe. Don't call this number again. He hung up. That was a mistake, I said. He'll use this against me. Say I'm putting Lily in danger. Let him try. The next morning, Dante received a call. He listened for 2 minutes, said 3 words, and hung up. Volkov wants to negotiate. What does that mean? It means I have something he wants more than he wants a war. What do you have? His nephew. I took him last night from a warehouse in Red Hook. He said it like he was discussing the weather. Volkov gets him back, we make an arrangement. He gets access to 1 dock under my supervision. I get a guarantee that you and Lily are untouchable. You kidnapped someone. Yes. To protect us? Yes. I should have been horrified, should have grabbed Lily and run, but all I felt was gratitude. Thank you, I whispered. His expression softened. You don't thank someone for protecting what matters to them. 3 days later, he took us to a new apartment. Not my studio. A real apartment in Brooklyn Heights. 2 bedrooms, windows that let in light, a kitchen with actual counter space. The lease is in your name, he said. First 6 months, paid. Dante, this is too much. It's not enough. Why are you doing this? He looked at me for a long moment. Because eventually, you won't need this place either. What does that mean? He didn't answer, just handed me the keys and left. But I understood. He was building something, a future, for me, for Lily, for us. 6 months after the Volkov incident, my life looked nothing like it had a year before. I woke in the Brooklyn Heights apartment, sunlight streaming through windows that faced east. Real sunlight, not the gray filtered light of my old studio. Lily had her own room, painted pale yellow at her request, filled with books and toys and the kind of childhood I'd thought I couldn't give her. And 3 mornings a week, I woke with Dante beside me. We'd never had a conversation about when he started staying over. It just happened. One night he'd driven us home after dinner at Gabriella's, and I'd asked if he wanted coffee. He'd said yes. We'd sat at my small kitchen table until midnight, talking about nothing important, and when he'd finally stood to leave, I'd asked him to stay. He'd looked at me for a long moment, then he'd nodded. The next morning, there was a toothbrush in my bathroom. The morning after that, a drawer in my dresser had quietly filled with his clothes. By the end of the first month, half my closet belonged to him. Lily accepted it without question. To her, Dante had always been there. The man who taught her Italian words, who brought her pastries from the bakery, who read her stories in a language she was slowly starting to understand. I still worked for him. 3 days a week now, remotely. The translation work was steady, posited into my account with precision every 2 weeks. I'd saved enough to hire a real lawyer, enough to prove to the family court judge that I had stability. The custody hearing had been postponed twice, Philip's doing, though I didn't know why. His visits with Lily continued on schedule, but he'd stopped pushing for more time, stopped making threats. I suspected Dante had something to do with that. I didn't ask. Sunday dinners had become tradition, sometimes at Gabriella's apartment, sometimes at Dante's penthouse. Always loud, always crowded with family I hadn't known existed. This Sunday, we were at Gabriella's. Her place in Soho was bigger than Dante's, decorated in warm colors that made it feel lived in. 2 of Dante's other sisters were there. Lucia, 28, who managed the financial side of the restaurants, and Francesca, 25, who handled marketing and had opinions about everything. 3 nephews ran through the apartment, Lily chasing after them, shrieking with laughter. I stood in the kitchen with the sisters, ostensibly helping prepare dinner, but mostly watching them work with the efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times. So, Lucia said, not looking up from the pasta dough she was rolling. You're living together. Not officially, I said. All 3 sisters looked at me. He stays over 3 nights a week, Gabriella said. He has a drawer. That's living together. We haven't talked about it. Francesca laughed. Of course you haven't. He's Italian. He'll wait for the perfect moment, which means approximately never. He bought a ring 2 weeks ago, Lucia said casually. I froze. What? A ring, engagement, diamonds, the whole thing. She glanced at me. You didn't know? No. Gabriella shot Lucia a look. You weren't supposed to tell her. Why not? She should know. Because now she'll be expecting it, and he'll know she knows, and he'll wait even longer. I set down the tomato I'd been cutting. He bought an engagement ring. 2 weeks ago, Lucia confirmed. From a jeweler in the Diamond District. I saw the receipt. My heart was pounding. That doesn't mean he's going to use it. All 3 sisters looked at me, like I was adorable and stupid. He's going to use it, Francesca said. The question is when, and what you'll say. I don't know, I admitted. The kitchen went quiet. Gabriella turned to face me fully. You don't know if you'll say yes? A year ago I was scrubbing toilets. Now I'm at family dinner with a man who controls half the shipping in New York and apparently bought me a ring. I don't know how to process that. Do you love him? Lucia asked. The question was so direct, it stole my breath. I don't know if he... All 3 of them spoke at once. He does. How can you possibly know that? Because we've known him for 37 years, Gabriella said. We watched him raise us, after our mother died. We watched him build an empire from nothing. We've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. He smiles now, Francesca added. Real smiles. You did that. I didn't know what to say. Lucia stepped closer. What are you afraid of? That I'll wake up and this will be gone. That I don't deserve it. That Lily will get hurt if it falls apart. Then don't let it fall apart, Gabriella said simply. Choose him. Choose this. Stop waiting for permission to want something good. Dinner was chaos. 8 adults, 4 children, not enough chairs. Lily sat between Dante and me, chattering in broken Italian to one of her cousins. Dante corrected her pronunciation gently, his hand resting on the back of my chair. After dinner, the children scattered to the living room. The adults lingered at the table, talking and laughing. Dante's hand had moved from the chair to my shoulder, his thumb tracing absent patterns on my skin. I leaned into him. He looked down at me, something soft in his expression. "You're quiet," he said. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how different this is from a year ago." His hand tightened on my shoulder. "Better?" "So much better." Later in the car on the way home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat. Dante drove, one hand on the wheel, the other holding mine. "Philip called yesterday," I said. His hand tensed. "What did he want?" "To tell me he's moving. California. He accepted a position at Stanford." Dante didn't look at me. And he's dropping the custody case. Full. He'll still see Lily when he's in New York, but he's not pushing for more time. "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved, suspicious. Did you do something?" I made a suggestion. He listened. "What kind of suggestion?" "The kind that ensured he understood how much easier his life would be, 3,000 miles away." I should have been angry, should have told him he couldn't keep managing my life without asking, but all I felt was grateful. "Thank you," I whispered. He lifted my hand to his lips, kissed my knuckles. "You don't thank me for protecting what's mine." "What's mine?" The words settled in my chest, warm and certain. 4 months later, I found out I was pregnant. I took the test in the bathroom of the Brooklyn Heights apartment. Tentment, Lily at preschool, Dante at a meeting downtown. Stared at the 2 pink lines for 5 full minutes. We hadn't talked about this, hadn't planned it, but we also hadn't been careful. I called Gabriella. "I'm pregnant." Silence. Then, does he know? Not yet. He's going to lose his mind. In a good way. "Are you sure?" "Claire, he bought you a ring 4 months ago, and still hasn't used it because he's waiting for the perfect moment. He's wanted this from the beginning. He just didn't know how to ask." That night I told him. We were in bed, the lights off, just the glow of the city through the windows. His arm was around me, my head on his chest. "I need to tell you something," I said. "Okay. I'm pregnant." His breathing stopped. Then his arm tightened around me. "Say that again." "I'm pregnant, about 6 weeks." He rolled, pulling me with him until I was on my back, and he was above me. I could barely see his face in the darkness, but I felt the intensity of his gaze. "You're sure?" "I took 3 tests." "How do you feel?" "Terrified, happy, confused." I touched his face. "How do you feel?" He didn't answer with words, just kissed me, slow and deep and full of something that felt like forever. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "I love you," he said quietly. "I should have said it months ago, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Claire. You and Lily, and this baby, all of it." Tears burned my eyes. "I love you too. Marry me." I laughed, the sound watery. "You're only asking because I'm pregnant." "I'm asking because I bought a ring 4 months ago, and I've been trying to find the perfect moment. But this is it. This moment, right here. Marry me." "You don't have the ring. It's in the drawer. Left side, under my socks." Of course it was. "Ask me again in the morning," I whispered, "with the ring. And I'll say yes." He kissed me again. "You'll say yes now." "Yes," I said against his mouth. "Yes." 9 months after Philip moved to California, I gave birth to a boy. Dante was there, holding my hand, speaking soft Italian that I didn't understand, but felt in my bones. Lily was with Gabriella, waiting to meet her brother. When they placed him in my arms, tiny and red-faced and perfect, Dante sat beside me on the hospital bed. "Matteo," he said, "after my father." I looked at him, surprised. "I thought you hated your father." "I did, but he gave me my sisters, and they gave me you." He touched the baby's head, his hand impossibly gentle. "So maybe I forgive him." Lily met her brother an hour later, climbed onto the bed carefully, staring at him with wide eyes. "He's so small," she whispered. "You were this small once," I said. "Can I hold him?" Dante lifted her into his lap, helped her position her arms, placed Matteo in them carefully. She looked up at me, beaming. "Mommy, I'm a big sister." "Yes, you are. And Mr. Ravenna is my dad now, right?" The room went quiet. I nodded. Yes, he said to Lily, if you want me to be. I do. She looked back down at Mateo. Hi, baby brother. I'm Lily, and this is our dad. 3 weeks later, we moved into Dante's penthouse. Not because he asked, because I wanted to. Because waking up without him felt wrong. Because Lily asked every morning when we were going to Daddy's house. Because this was where we belonged. Gabriella helped me pack the Brooklyn Heights apartment. You kept the card, she said, holding up the small frame with Dante's business card inside. Of course I kept it. Why? Because it was the first time someone saw me, really saw me. Not the struggling mother, not the ex-wife, just me. He still sees you. I know. She set the frame in the box carefully. Good. Don't forget that. The penthouse had been transformed. Lily's room was painted and furnished. A nursery waited for Mateo, decorated in soft blues and grays. My things fit seamlessly beside Dante's, like they'd always been there. Sunday dinners continued, now in our home, the table crowded with family. Gabriella and her sharp observations, Lucia and her quiet efficiency, Francesca and her loud laughter. Nephews running through rooms, Lily teaching them English, Dante teaching her Italian. One Sunday, 6 months after Mateo was born, I stood in the kitchen watching it all, the noise, the chaos, the love. Dante came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, rested his chin on my shoulder. What are you thinking? I touched his hands, looked at the family we'd built. That a year and a half ago, I was alone, broke, scared. I had nothing. And now I have everything. He turned me in his arms, kissed me slowly. So do I. They say you can't pinpoint the exact moment your life changes, but I can. It was a cold afternoon in February, a playground in Battery Park, a man I didn't know saying my name like he'd been waiting to say it. I didn't know then that he'd save me. Didn't know I'd save him back. Didn't know we'd build this, a family, a home, a life that looked nothing like the one I'd planned, and everything like the one I needed. But here we are, and I'd do it all again. Every terrifying, beautiful moment.